So first of all, the path of deformation. Look back at verse 1. Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of scoffers. So there's a progression there. The psalmist is saying that there's a path of deformation, and it begins with this person who is walking in the counsel of the wicked. So two things we need to ask here. Number one, who are the wicked? And number two, what's their counsel? So who are the wicked? What we're going to see as we move through this verse is that the people get worse and worse. There's the wicked, then there's the sinners, then there's the scoffers. So the wicked in the paradigm of bad are actually the least bad in Psalm 1. Now that throws us off because we hear wicked and we think that's about as bad as it gets. If I called someone wicked, like we'd be in a fist fight, right? Like it doesn't get much worse than that. But the psalmist is saying the wicked person is simply this. Imagine there's a dispute between two people. Two people get into some kind of argument over something and they go before a judge and they say, you decide between us who's right and who's wrong, right? So the two people go, the judge hears the case, he hears all the facts, and he gets to the end and he makes a public announcement. In this case, between these two people, here's the righteous person who acted rightly, and here's the wicked person who acted wickedly. In our day and age, we might call the wicked person in that case a first-time offender, right? This isn't perpetual sin that's ongoing that everybody in society knows, oh, stay away from that person. That's the wicked person. No, this is a first-time offender that in this one case, they've been found to be wicked. And here's why this point is so important. When the psalmist says the path of deformation starts with listening to the counsel of the wicked, he's not talking about taking advice from someone who's trying to obviously lead you astray. This is not a person that you see on the street walking downtown and you move to the other side of the street, right? This is not a person that all of society agrees, oh yeah, we stay away from that person. They should be put away for life. Nothing like that. This is a very normal person who just in one case has done this bad thing. The psalmist is trying to show us the path of deformation doesn't begin when we jump headfirst into obvious sin. No, it's much more subtle than that. It's much less obvious. It starts off not looking dangerous at all. It begins by taking bad advice. If you look back at verse 1 again, he says it's the counsel of the wicked that puts us on this path. In other words, the path of deformation, the path of changing into a person we don't want to be, begins in the mind. Now put these two things together. Here's what Psalm 1 verse is teaching us. It's teaching us that everything we allow in our minds, no matter how innocent it may seem, has an effect on our souls, either for good or for evil. Everything we allow in our minds, no matter how innocent it may seem, has an effect on our souls, either for good or for evil. I did some reading about neurobiology this week. I'm way out of my depth here, so I'm going to read this part, okay? I'm just going to read it to you. Here's what neurobiologists tell us. Neurobiologists tell us that when thoughts enter our minds, they create neural pathways in our brains. Those neural pathways, in turn, create DNA proteins in our nervous systems. Y'all with me so far? Awesome. They create DNA proteins in our nervous systems, which are then disseminated through our bodies and become part of us, and some neurobiologists argue are in turn passed on to our children in their genetic code. The only reason I read that to you is to say this. I always love when scientists come to biblical conclusions. It's like my favorite thing. Because the psalmist, thousands of years ago, didn't talk about proteins or DNA strands or anything like that, but he gave us the same reality, right? That we're changed through our minds. When we let things come into our minds, we're shaped. And so here's the idea. What we give our attention to will ultimately shape the person we become. Listen to how John Mark Comer says it. He says, what you give your attention to is the person you become. Put it another way. The mind is the portal to the soul. And what you fill your mind with will shape the trajectory of your character. In the end, we become what we give our attention to, for better or for worse. So just to make it very practical for us, the path of deformation. Changing into the person that we don't want to be begins when we don't realize that our entertainment choices, our reading habits, our friend groups, our Spotify playlists, our screen time, our podcasts, the people we follow on social media, our news sources all affect us in one way or another. Either deforming us into the image of the devil or forming us into the image of Jesus, all of them.